Hello, welcome to today's HR Huddle. I'm Tamera Loerzel, and with me is Samantha Mansfield. And we are here today to explore campus recruiting. We've been really working on the pipeline, as we've talked about in previous HR Huddles, and how do we attract more people to the accounting profession and strategies that we can do, following up on the National Pipeline Advisory Group's report that was published last July. And also talking with firms as we've been facilitating retreats and working with HR professionals about what can we be doing to increase our opportunities at the campus level. And Samantha was just with a group of educators recently at a state society event. And so we've just had like different pieces coming up that we thought we should just stop and say, hey, here's some things that we've been seeing people try and recommend, and some requests like from the educators that we would bring to you. We'd love to hear yours as well. So as you're listening to this conversation, or if it's afterwards, message us because we'd love to hear some of the successes you're having, some of the new strategies maybe you're applying to be more successful in attracting that talent at that campus level, college level, et cetera. And we also know, I just guess I want to start before we jump into that, is we know the market and economy is a little bit spongy right now. We know there's been a little bit of maybe relief in the pressure of talent. We've been hearing that this past peak period, that we feel like we've got more people in the right spots than maybe we have previously, or at least pockets of it in different groups. And that's good. But it also, if we make sure we have the right people, it allows us to maybe prune those that are not a fit, have more confidence to do that, and go target those that are a fit. And so, having a focus in your foot on the gas pedal, maybe at a little bit different level, a little bit different pace, is still important. And so that we can say, how do we really upskill, bring in the right people, bring in new, people for different roles, and, continue to have that growth in that area. So I just wanted to acknowledge that kind of big picture, where we are in the market, as we jump in here and look at, some specific aspects. So Sam, anything you want to add, to set that up, or is there a place you want to start?
Well, I'd like to echo what you just said about not letting up on talent, because one of the things that we've certainly talked about for a number of years is just how flat talent has felt with the amount of work, right? And the demand for the services are still out there. And what firms have been forced to do quite a bit is that we're trying to hire to catch up to the opportunities that are there. And yet, really, firms are finally at a point where, man, we have capacity now in the firm that we can hire clients, I should clarify, into the capacity that we have. So talent is trained up for the type of work and the opportunities that we're bringing in, and strategically where we're growing, as opposed to trying to do all that backfilling, which then can put the burden on the experienced people. As well as doesn't always create the greatest experience for clients initially, because again, we're trying to bring somebody up to speed once we sold the work. So I just really wanted to echo that, that it's really a place that might feel uncomfortable, because the profession is so used to having a backfill all the time, that it's a really good place to be in, and the demand is out there for your services. So we can look at that, of how to use that talent. And then the other piece, like you said, I got to just speak with educators, which was so wonderful and eye-opening to get to see what they were saying, what interns go back to campus and say, as well as it unfortunately confirmed that what's happening on campus is still an awful lot about tax and audit. These are the two tracks. And when we take a look at the information out of the National Pipeline Advisory Group research, like you referenced, Tamara, and consider that we have fewer and fewer people who are choosing accounting, and yet we're still only showing them these two paths, or these two traditional paths is a better description of it. We're missing an opportunity in recruiting of highlighting all the different opportunities that can be done with accounting. So we've got forensic, which you might say, well, we need more senior people on that. But at the same time, we can still contemplate how you bring a more junior person in, and what they could start learning and what the process is that's different. They may not have that critical analytical eye on the data yet, but just learning how it's so different, in the problem solving and the riddles that they're trying to figure out, if you're interested in that kind of thing. Or, of course, advisory. And that's what I had been asked to come speak to them about is, well, what are the skill sets that firms are looking for with advisory? And so when sharing that, that's when they revealed to me, but we're not hearing about that recruiting, even though I speak to firm leaders all the time that are saying, this is what we need. And we're starting to incorporate interns into our advisory. So those are some of the additional pieces that are very much playing into our recruiting strategy. And that's why I said to Tamara, I'm like, I think this could be a great HR huddle, because maybe we need to take a look at how are we putting our strategy together to go on campus, and maybe that's a place to start.
Perfect. Well, and I think I'm going to follow your lead here about what we can be doing from a big picture about the accounting profession and the opportunities in the accounting profession. And one of them obviously is it's just not your traditional tax and audit paths, which is what most people typically think of. And I think even before that, students think it's math.
Yes.
Like, I'm not good at math. And then they self-weed themselves out instead of that, it's the language of business. Well, what does that mean? And telling the stories of the opportunities we have to help clients, help transform their lives, help them, with their businesses and solve problems. It's a puzzle, like you said, especially the more advisory we are. Help them strategically, tax planning strategies, things like that. But then there's other, consulting projects, technology, the role of technology in accounting today, sharing examples of that. I know there's a couple of firms that was doing some research, on, culture and wow factors that attract clients and talent. And one of them was technology for this firm. And they were showing all the ways they're integrating technology into their service lines. And, fintech was one of them. And, are we sharing that kind of information and talking about that when we go to college, when we go, meet with Beta Alpha Psi, when we're meeting with the career counselors, so that people see the broad picture of what those opportunities are. We need to tell more stories about what that is and get in there and demonstrate that. Maybe even bring a client along to have them tell their story. Could be a way to demonstrate that. Have some of your young people that are really engaged in the technology and AI side to show, how we're using it. Those are going to be the things that are going to attract and motivate, our next gen, that they can see it as a really progressive, hands-on, make a difference profession. And I know one of the things that they identified in the National Pipeline Advisory Group report is to move away from it being a weed out degree to draw them in. And so it starts, with accounting 101. And even in high school, my son was like, absolutely not. And I was like, you own your own business. And a lot of young people do, by the way. I said, this will help you from an entrepreneur perspective. And he's always dreaming up the next thing. And I just could not get him to see what the possibilities are in the course. He finished that course, but then he's like, no way. So how do we move away from that being a weed out? And like, we've been proud of that or something. if you pass that, then you pass the muster, and then you're okay to be in accounting and pursue that degree. And instead say, look at how appealing this is from a career path perspective, and do that earlier. I even saw something about maybe do debits and credits later, not even in the first course.
Yeah.
That could sound like crazy to some people. But looking at those kinds of changes within the accounting degree and within the story we're telling around accounting at the college level, but also even sooner than that at the high school level. I know you spoke to the high school, Sam, and I've got a niece that's graduating from high school next year, and she's like, I'm looking at accounting. I'm like, great, tell me more. What do you see about that? And, helping her paint the picture for that. We've got to get to these kids sooner. They are more likely to choose accounting if they know somebody or somebody influenced them. There's studies about that. The statistics are in there. And so these are some ways that we can start doing that to make accounting more appealing.
Oh, 100%. And I was going to say, where you talked about, let's diversify what the perspective is of accounting and make that earlier, take that to a younger age, because even when you, to your point, it helps tremendously when they know somebody in accounting, right?
Right.
Well, when we think about, unfortunately, how the population of the accounting profession is smaller in relation to other professionals, perhaps. So I might not have as much access to somebody. And it's unfortunate how there's still so much of a dated perspective of what the accounting profession is. So, if somebody says, hey, we have this accounting class at high school, and then sludge at the table, at the dinner table about that's like, bean counters, taxes, those kinds of things. And then, oh, well, okay, that didn't sound exciting, and I move on, right? And so, like, when I went and did the high school presentation that you just mentioned, Tamera, I had a slide that I shared with them where I showed all the different credentials you can get: a CITP, a CGMA, a CMA. There are just so many. I actually ran out of room on the slide, and I just said, there's even more than what I have here. And I probably had 10, 12 different types of credentials that you can get, all based on what your passion is and what you're most interested in. And so I think that, again, reinforces that when we're recruiting, of really listening to what they're looking for, or if we can get earlier to the middle school and to the high school and give them those ideas of what the impact of accounting is. Because they're too young to be able to know what they want to do, right? They're not going to say, I want to be this, I want to be, they don't know. I mean, I kind of was asking, does anybody know what they want? And it was complete deer in the headlights. So, one of the phenomenal things about a career or a degree in accounting is the tremendous flexibility. I mean, accounting is the language of business. So if you know those core principles, those foundations, you can take that to any industry. You can be in public, and you can go hit private or business or BNI if you wanted to, and then boomerang back to public if you wanted. You could go be educators at the end of your career. Like, I ran into a number of them. They had once been in public accounting, and now they were finishing their careers as professors. So, I mean, there's just so much flexibility. And as recruiters and influencers on the profession, we just have such an opportunity that we may not be capitalizing on.
Yes, love it. And I have to say, we have to be careful, though, because when my son was in 4th grade, he had a spelling word, accountant, and they had to write a sentence about it. And he said, being an accountant is a gory job. And I was like, what? Tell me more about that. I did not know he was watching the movie The Accountant with my husband. So we had to have a family meeting about it. So we create all kinds of perceptions.
Yes, that is hilarious.
To help manage around that. Yeah, I'll never forget that, being in the accounting profession myself. And that was his spelling sentence that he had. but there we need to tell the stories of all the opportunities. And I think we need to also go places maybe we traditionally haven't gone, and give you a couple examples. One is minority serving institutions, and another is community colleges.
Mhm.
And so, how do we go and expand our reach? We hear all the time, I'm competing with the big four, or we're looking for the top candidates. And how do we go beyond that? Sometimes those B students are the ones that actually have grit. They've had to work a part-time or a full-time job to get through college. How do we find those people and bring them along? So when we're looking at community colleges, how do we get in there and look at intern opportunities? We can look from an advisor perspective. We can look for accounting degrees, not necessarily somebody that's going to go into audit. There's all kinds of creative career paths options, but then also how to help them transition to four-year colleges. What can we do to bring those opportunities to them and help them identify, what are the courses that are next, what do they need to do to complete their degrees, stay in touch with them through that transition, offer to be a mentor and a coach. We can do that, in the minority serving institutions also, get on board, become a mentor, find role models. 48%, about 48% of next gen is not white.
Mhm.
So our next gen talent and our next gen clients, we need to appeal and look like them. And so we need to go reach out to them. You could say, well, my community here in Minnesota or Michigan, is not like that. Where is it? And you're closer to Detroit maybe than some other communities. I'm, pretty close to Minneapolis, but there's definite pockets where it's not. But that doesn't mean that there aren't these schools that we should be pursuing they're probably just not on our radar. And so let's go find out about them and start to have a presence and start to tell the stories and start educating the students about the opportunities in accounting. Again, if they haven't had a role model, like you said, then it's not going to even be on their radar to consider. And we could be missing out on some really good talent that we could help coach and mentor and, have in our firms. So those are some places to maybe explore that we haven't traditionally done or maybe consistently done in the past.
Yeah. And when you were talking about what is the track record of the student, right, that we're looking for, that was very interesting listening to the partners at the event that I was at with the state society. And they said, man, I'll take a 3.2 GPA and somebody who's been involved in activities or had a job, all through college. They said, way before I'll take that 4.0.
Right.
And reason being is they said they know how to manage time, they know how to have discipline, and they have some hunger to go after it. And so that might be something as a recruiter, if you haven't had that conversation with the partners in your firm, take a look at that, because I think inherently we would think, oh, the person who just did the highest and best academically, well, that's who we want. But that's, to your point, Tamera, of that's where somebody in community college who they're funding their whole way through and so forth, there may be a drive in them that somebody else might not have, and they show up differently. And there's still a lot of, the education is very important, and I'm not minimizing that at all. In addition, the education that happens in your offices is so tremendously important. And so if we've got somebody that's able and willing to learn, there's a lot that you're going to be able to build on that. And building drive is a harder thing to do. The other tip I would have for recruiters, so in addition to, like I said, ask ask if there's inputs of different profiles of what people have really seen as successful, if you don't already know. But also ask about what are the skills that they want in client accounting advisory or transaction advisory services. And, some of these other advisory services that are just growing like wildfire in firms. I was very intrigued when I heard the question, but they're not recruiting on campus for this. And yet I know firms are doing interns and so forth for it. So I was wondering, do we have a mismatch or a lack of communication happening between the partners or the leaders that are trying to grow these new and emerging services and the recruiting team? Are they maybe those leaders trying to figure it out on their own and they're not collaborating enough with you? And so if you're not out recruiting for that, is that because I need to get more information from the leaders about these emerging services? And that's just something I would really encourage going forward.
Yeah. Smart. Brilliant. And make sure you have a campus champion, for any school that you're at. I'm going to say school, whether it's a community college or university or, whatever it is, that you have a champion that's building the relationships with the professors, meeting with them, talking about some of these ideas, talking to their classes, offering to go in and speak with their classes, offer to be, a mentor, not just the formal activities that college puts on, career day or interview day, for the interns, all of that we are probably pretty good at. Now, there might be some refinements we need to make in those areas, but where else can we be participating to bring people along and really invest in, as, part of what the National Pipeline Advisory Group calls, taking the pledge. But how can we, facilitate assigning an owner that's going to really get in there and know the people in the, career center, know people that are the professors, leading these areas, even the TAs, learning who they are on the, business side, but really building those relationships. And that can make a difference as well. So those are some strategies we just wanted to raise and say, maybe it's thinking newly about some of these, or maybe it's, hey, we've tried that once. Maybe it's time to, bring it back and look at how does this fit into our overall campus recruiting and strategy, as we look at, interns, as we look at hiring new staff and, where we're finding people and where we're getting in there and being known. It'll build your reputation by you telling the story. So, and we'd love to hear strategies that you've been implementing as well for campus recruiting, overall recruiting in general, but, specifically on this topic of campus recruiting. If there's anything you would add to our list, please share it with us. You can find us in social media, reply here, or reach out to us in email. We'd love to hear from you. So have a great week, and we will be on hiatus next week for Memorial Day. Enjoy your long weekend as we kick off what I guess most of us think is our official summer, and we will be with you in 2 weeks. Thank you so much. Take care.
Bye-bye.